Before I begin, I just want to say that I am not a mental health professional, and no part of this video should be taken above someone who actually is. Also, if you do have obsessive-compulsive disorder, please proceed with caution, and I shall explain why as we go on. Way back in the day, I used my platform a lot to talk about neurodivergence and mental health and mental illness in general. It was usually regulated to DeviantArt, where I'd post blog posts, articles, or whatever about depression, autism spectrum disorder, phobias, so on. Even on YouTube, I reviewed, or I guess commentated, on an old Autism Speaks commercial. More recently, I've stopped doing that. I've been trying to keep my content a lot more focused, and trying to minimize what I say about my personal life. There are a variety of reasons for that, some of which we'll talk about as we go on, but I did want to talk specifically about obsessive-compulsive disorder today, because I think it's kind of important, because OCD is very misunderstood by a lot of people. You've probably at least heard of the stereotypes. People with OCD are all clean and tidy neat freaks and constantly organizing things. They need everything neat and in a row. You've probably heard plenty of people say, "I'm a little OCD," or "everyone's a little OCD." Hell, you might have even said that yourself. Or maybe you think that OCD is just being germophobic or washing your hands a lot. I mean, during the early days of the pandemic, we were told to be, quote-unquote, very OCD and wash our hands a lot. I'll start with the technical stuff that anyone can look up. Obsessive-compulsive disorder has two components: obsessions and compulsions. Obsessions are unwanted thoughts, images, anxieties, things like that cause distress. And they can have different themes, most famously order or cleanliness. But there are many other themes: violent thoughts, sexual thoughts, religion, sin and morality, obsessions about things that you might have done, obsessions about things that you have done. The anxiety that these thoughts or feelings create causes the person to do something in order to remove the thought. These are the compulsions. Anxious thoughts about germs and contamination lead to cleaning as a compulsion, for example. I could go on and on about the technicals all day, but I don't think that helps anyone actually understand what this disorder is, and how badly it can really affect someone's life. And besides, there are plenty of articles to look into that if you're curious. OCD seems rather simple and straightforward, but it can actually be very complicated, and it can be really difficult to deal with. In a few simple words, OCD is hell. It is one of the worst things that I've had to deal with internally, and it can make even getting from one day to the next a constant struggle. I'll give you some examples of how it looks inside the head, some of which I come across myself, and some of which I've only heard through stories. The themes and the compulsions change, the severity may change, but what actually happens to someone with OCD tends to follow similar patterns. The tempo or the genre may change, but it is always the same song. Let's start with one of the most famous OCD themes: cleanliness and contamination. And I would like to put a trigger warning for people who actually have this specific theme. Please skip to this timestamp in the video. Have you ever washed your hands and felt like you missed a spot? You washed your hands for over a minute after using the bathroom. You're pretty sure that you got everything you could, but you feel it. You know the exact area that you missed, where your wrist meets your palm. In that entire minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes of washing your hands, you have to have missed that spot. It just feels that way. At some point, you just weren't paying strict attention to washing your hands. There's stuff on it. Wash it again. Wash again. Wash again. There's shit on your hand. You're getting shit on everything. Wash your hand again. Wash again. Do it now. People are going to get sick if you don't. It will be your fault if you don't. Wash it again. Wash it now. To give in here is folly. Because if you can see that your hands are still dirty, logically it means that everything you touched in between both hand washes is contaminated, and thus they also must be cleaned. And in order to completely get rid of the contamination, you have to wash your hands again after you've disinfected everything that was contaminated. And I guarantee you, when you're going back to the bathroom to wash again, you're probably going to touch something else in your haste. And your reward for giving in is to want to clean more, pay more attention to washing more, and despite that, feel like you've missed a spot more and more. So what happens if you don't give in and you don't wash your hands again? What happens is you keep hearing your mind beat this into you again and again, getting louder and more annoying. You can try and argue with the thoughts. You can tell these thoughts that you were paying attention the whole time. And even if you weren't, a full minute or 2 minutes or however long is enough to know that it's more likely than not that you got everything. But you could have missed something. It's possible. Your attention could have possibly lapsed. And here's the reality of the situation. You don't know. You really can't. Obsessive-compulsive disorder is a brain's desire to protect itself from uncertainty in a very uncertain world. It demands a level of assurance that is not possible in reality. But it has a lot of annoying little tricks to try and get that level of assurance, most notably playing with your memory. At this point, you probably heard about gaslighting. Gaslighting is when you use psychological manipulation in order to undermine people's confidence in themselves. For example, if you were to move someone's car keys around and start going on about how they always manage to lose things or that they were forgetful, that's gaslighting. OCD actually does something very similar internally. I've literally had my own brain withhold memories from me in all of this. The laundry used to be one of the most difficult tasks for me. The second I started a load, I'd be concerned that I didn't put in any detergent. This gets even worse when you have multiple loads of laundry, because the brain starts questioning if you're sure you put in detergent for each separate load. Are you sure? Are you sure? The answer is that you're never sure, because the brain is designed to not record these minor tasks that require no thought. That's why we as humans form habits, automated activities that require no thoughts or attention, so we can have the processing power for the more important things, like ruminating on whether we've actually done these things that require no thoughts or attention. Going deeper into that battlefield leaves you up short. I put each and every detergent pod in the laundry machine in a unique and memorable way. I made sure that they all stand out, and I paid close attention the entire time. Yeah, but how do you know that you're not misremembering it? And one of those times was actually the last time you did laundry. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, was it? Okay, now we're using a notebook. I see the Tide Pod go in, I mark it down on the notebook. Yeah, but are you really sure? Did you really see the Tide Pod go in? Maybe you just got lazy or absent-minded. Or maybe you didn't even mark it down this time. Go check the book. Why would I mark it down if I didn't see the thing go in? Well, it's simple. You've been sticking to this for so long that you're just not paying attention anymore. This time around, you know that it took a little bit longer for you to mark down that check than it usually does. And the show goes on and on and on. This is just one typical chore. And this type of OCD can be affecting to many different chores for someone with contamination-themed OCD. Dishes are another big, difficult one because, fun fact, contamination, despite its stereotype, doesn't just refer to germs. You can have these same feelings for toxic chemicals or even cleaning solution, or even just plain old soap. You feel like the dishes are too dirty until you use too much soap. And then you feel like you've used too much soap until you've spent a long time rinsing the same dish again and again and again. And then for a bonus, your hands feel wet for an hour afterwards, because this contamination-themed OCD can also apply to water as well. I hope you don't need to change a light bulb for a while. Contamination-themed OCD is worse when you're living with other people. Most people don't have OCD, and they don't do things like wash their hands every time they come home, or wash their hands every single time that they use the bathroom. I mean, sometimes they do. Sometimes they're good about this, but the OCD gremlin says it doesn't matter. You don't know how good they've cleaned. They might have done a total shit job. Maybe they have. They probably have. Either way, they couldn't have done it as good as you. They've missed things, clearly. And I mean, generally, human beings do miss something. And this mental illness will eke out each opportunity it can to make your life hell. And this is only one singular theme. Just one theme that OCD has. This is one that I had a lot, especially during the pandemic. But themes do wax and wane sometimes. It usually depends on the scenario and what's going on in your life, because OCD is always listening. This is why I warned people who had contamination OCD about this segment in the video. You see, when I say things like, a roommate probably misses spots while cleaning, someone with contamination-themed OCD might hear that, and that can build and integrate into their own problems. For example, I've heard that if you smell something like shit, it means that there are fecal matter particles in the air, which means that they're on everything in the bathroom. The walls, the sink, the floor, the toothbrush. Also, if you touch the actual bowl in the sink, you need to wash your hands all over again from the start, because that bowl was full of poop water. It's not different from the toilet when you get down to it. OCD is observant, and it will grow and grow if it can. In many ways, it's like an allergic reaction. While that is your body overreacting to a physical problem, OCD is your brain overreacting to a physical problem. Because the reality is, the world is actually pretty fucking gross. A lot of people could do a lot better with washing their hands in general. Regardless, there's germs on everything. A bird has probably shit on your car door handle at one point, and the only thing that has ever disinfected that was some rainwater, which was contaminated in and of itself. After all, rainwater comes from bodies of water that fish piss in, and the sky doesn't do jack shit to purify it. OCD likes to do its research. It wants to know what the danger is. And because the world is so gross, the information that it gathers tends to increase anxiety, not decrease it. Doing this kind of research is actually another compulsion. It's another way that the brain tries to deal with this, that ends up making the problem worse. One thing you might not understand is that obsessions and compulsions are a vicious cycle. The obsession tries to make you do the compulsion, and the compulsion ends up making the obsession worse, which makes the compulsion worse, and so on and so on and so on. In my personal experience, when it comes to OCD, there is no standing ground. You are either getting better or you are getting worse, with no in between. And how do you get better with contamination-themed OCD? Acceptance. The world is gross. I might not have washed my hands well enough, and I'm spreading shit on everything. I might have missed putting in the detergent this time. I'll have to wear dirty, smelly clothes this time and do it right next time. I might get sick. Oh well. OCD is an overreaction to danger, and the way you take care of it is by reducing your concern over the danger. It's called exposure and response prevention therapy, which can be hard to do for people. It also needs a better acronym. If you know, then you know. When it comes to germs, you have to get dirty and just stew in your thoughts. And it sucks, because it's not like there is zero danger. To defeat OCD, you have to accept that bad things might happen, terrible things even, or the OCD will end up defining your life. And this is only one type of OCD, or should I say only one particular theme. It's also not the only one that I'm experienced with. Remember when I said that OCD was good at playing with your memory? Well, there are two specific types where this becomes really apparent. Real event OCD and false memory OCD. And if you have either of these, this is your warning to buck out to the next timestamp. I bring these two up together because, for me at least, they play off of each other a lot. So, false memory OCD. Let's say someone you know recently had an alcohol-related problem. They're not dead, but they had to go to the hospital. The natural question to ask is, why? Could this have been noticed ahead of time? You start remembering the times that you might have been a bit of a jerk. Maybe. These interactions weren't recorded or anything. All you have to go off is your memory, so you can't really know. But maybe that laugh they had seemed a little bit uncomfortable. Maybe you accidentally offended them. Maybe that one little harmless jab wasn't so harmless. Could you have made them want to start drinking? Or drinking more? You certainly didn't make the situation any better. You should have noticed. You should have noticed this. The signs were there. You missed them. When in reality, this had nothing to do with you at all. This is just something that happened because sometimes in life, things just happen. OCD has an ego. It thinks that it is responsible for the world. It thinks that it has the power to break or fix someone's life entirely. If you don't care about yourself, then it will move on to things that you do care about, and it will try its best to make it your fault when something bad happens to them. And it will try its best to make it your fault when something bad happens. While OCD can make you feel like your short-term memory is absolutely terrible, it can make you feel like you have impeccable long-term memory, as you start remembering events and scenarios from decades ago. And all the while, OCD will do its damnedest to convince you that you are a terrible person. The worst of the worst if it can, using some of the flimsiest evidence possible. It can build details in your mind that never actually happened. Especially when it comes to things that don't have factual proof either way. You accidentally bumped into someone while walking in the hall and you accidentally knocked them over. OCD. Are you sure that was an accident? I mean, you were upset with them at the time, don't you remember? Maybe you just made it look like an accident. Or maybe it just wasn't as much of an accident as you thought. I mean, you don't know that it wasn't, do you? The accusations from within can be as simple as being a bit of a jerk from time to time to the literal worst things imaginable. That touch that you thought was harmless was actually very inappropriate. We all know how bad internet trolls can be, but imagine if one was determined to make you feel bad, but they had access to all of your memories and they knew explicitly everything that you cared about, and everything you cared about not being. And imagine if they had the argumentation skills of someone like Manfred von Karma. And imagine if telling yourself again and again that you're not any of these horrible things makes the feelings worse as the mental illness brings in more and more evidence, strips them of any context in order to try and make the case that you are this monster. If you logic your way out of this, making your own case and trying to absolve yourself, here's what OCD has to say. Yeah, but other people won't think that way, will they? This is so easy to misinterpret and easy to read, and they will interpret this in the worst way possible. And when they do, you're going to be in a shit ton of trouble. The more you argue with this, the more that you pay attention to this, the worse that it will get. One compulsion that comes up a lot that's hard to identify for most people is rumination, because it's not something you can see, and it's hard to measure. It's what you do when you keep on arguing and thinking on the topic of your obsession in your mind, creating this inner dialogue that can go on for hours and hours. You have to ignore it. You have to pretend that this isn't going on in your head, and live your life as if it wasn't. Because the more you end up trying to prove to yourself or to the world that you're innocent, the more guilty that you will feel in the end. And of course, the reality is that no one is perfect, and sometimes you did screw up at some point in history. For example, me. I've had an internet career for 10 years, and many of my stupidest possible words are still free for viewing, and for a lot of them, I was also an ass. There are chat logs and videos and probably a ton of else that prove how much of an ass I was. Real event OCD. You will never move past this. No one will ever let you move on. Your past is all that you'll ever be. This person was indeed hurt, and it's your fault, and it's proven. You fucked up, and you can't fix this. This is going to define you for the rest of your life. You fucked up. I repeat, you fucked up. There is no way to fix this. There is no way to fix this. The damage is done. This is who you are. The damage is done. It's not going to get any better. The best times are over. Start facing that now. The roads that this theme of OCD leads you are very, very bad and very, very dark. And these are ones that I followed before. I've dealt with very bad depression in my past, to the point of suicidal ideation. As an adult, I have never made plans, but just the idea of suicide has cropped up a lot, and how I'd prefer death to living, with no hope for the future and how the best was all behind me. With that in mind, I'm going to say something right now that I know will be controversial. In my opinion, when my OCD is at its worst, I find it a worse experience than any time I was ever depressed. Here's how my OCD is responding to what I just said. People are going to take that out of context. They're going to clip it, they're going to run with it, clown on it, and do all the things that the internet has been known to do. It's going to be your next big fuck-up, the one that you'll be paying for years and years. It's going to put you further in that hole that you know you'll never end up climbing out of. That statement is offensive, it's going to piss people off. It's going to tell people that you don't give a fuck about people with depression. It's going to tell people that you're flawed, you're broken, and you deserve to be left in the dust. You're horrible. How could you possibly say something like that? For a long time now, this has been my train of thought with just about everything that I have said online. For example, I posted a very innocuous tweet. Mario movie spoilers. Mario is indeed in the movie. OCD. People are going to think that you're making fun of people who don't like spoilers for a movie that's still in theaters, dipshit. And that trail goes in its own direction. And you know what the fun part is? The magic of the internet means that it is guaranteed that someone out there is going to read that comment in that way. This is one of the reasons that I had to stop making the top 10 best videos list. It's because watching my old work, all I could ever think about was what every single wayward sentence or statement would look out of context. What I objectively did or said in any of them didn't matter. How good or bad the video was didn't matter. And this is a feeling that I've been having for every video that I made, at least for this year, probably longer. That within them, I inadvertently said or did something stupid, and that would be the end. That I'd be read the wrong way. Or I'd be read exactly the right way, the way that I intended. And that would be the problem. The video that you're watching now is no exception. OCD. Everyone is going to see this whole thing as begging for sympathy, or trying to downplay all the horrible things that you've actually done. I said before that it was the pandemic that first set off my OCD, but while that is clear that it definitely made things worse, I think that I've been dealing with this for a very, very long time. And the fact that it got so bad over the pandemic is what made me realize that I had it. Like, as far back as 2015, I was going on and on about fear over death and dying, which, you know, is another theme. If you remember my bounty hamster video from back in 2016, I said that I wrote 20,000 words of a novel in about 2 weeks. You know why I did that? Because obsession over dying and not doing all the things that I wanted to do in this life and being forgotten led directly to the compulsion of writing. Going back through the timeline, I've actually probably had this since I was a teenager, when I noticed a bruise that didn't heal on my body, and I connected it to some of the worst physical illnesses out there. A lot of these online articles will give you all of the common compulsions, like hand washing or organizing. Those two are the most famous ones. In reality, anything can be a compulsion that gets you to play into the obsession. For example, if you keep asking your friends, "I'm not a terrible person, am I? Are you sure? I'm not annoying you by asking, am I?" This is called reassurance seeking. and it's something that a lot of people naturally do, and generally there's nothing wrong with it. But it can become a compulsion, and that's a highly dangerous part of this mental illness. OCD can turn coping mechanisms toxic by turning them into a compulsion, jump-starting that vicious cycle. Here's another example. Like many mental illnesses, OCD does have triggers. However, avoidance can also become a compulsion. It's a game that goes on and on and on, and it is never fun. Speaking of that, one of the worst parts of OCD is how isolating it can be. It can make it very difficult to just live with other people for starters, because they're an uncontrolled and uncontrollable element in your life. And OCD hates what is uncontrollable. And, well, people in general are uncontrollable. OCD lets you know that any heart-to-heart conversation could backfire. It could become an accusation, and it can end things. It does its damnedest to keep you from actually connecting with other people. It wants you to withdraw. OCD plays this strange game where it tells you that the worst thing that can possibly happen is that you'll be alone, that people will find out this or that, or if there's nothing to find out, people will make something up or misinterpret, and they'll see that you've crossed the line of unforgivable. But at the same time, it's also telling you that the best possible thing that can happen is that you'll be alone, because you'll be completely safe and everything will be under your control and you won't have to deal with reality. The worst thing that you can ever do with OCD is to give it what it wants. You can't withdraw. That's my rule number one. But even as I try to wade through this, the thoughts scream like an angry, nagging toddler. On the outside, OCD might look like someone just cleaning things up or keeping things highly organized. On the inside, however, there's a war for sanity. And I know for a fact that some people have this even worse than I do, to the point where they're like showering for hours on end. Some days I do feel happy and, well, normal. However, some full weeks, I'm looking back on conversations from 10 years ago and reliving every single mistake that I have ever made in my life, and wondering if I'll even make it till tomorrow. For what it's worth, I am trying to get better, and it can get better. It can be a slow road, though. And for me, sometimes something unpredictable happens and the wind does get knocked out of me. But as long as any progress is being made, we're on the right track. And I do think that I'm on the right track.